Hello and welcome to this little addendum. I specifically need this addendum because one of the things we're going to be doing is using portable virtual machine formats. Before we go any further as well, you may notice there's a slight change. That's because I'm recording this after all of the other recordings. Okay then, so what I want to do in this little addendum is talk a little bit about the virtualization file formats we're using, which are OVA. I want to talk about their structure, so just a little bit of background to them, and then how we use them, just to finish off. And then what I'd like to do is just jump in and do a little demonstration of importing these files into VMware. To start off with, we're using virtualization because it gives us that flexibility that we need. It gives us that ability to run multiple machines. When it comes to using VMware, it's the portability between the laboratories and home machines, etc. And when it comes to something like VirtualBox, if it's your own machine, well, that's fine. It's a contained environment. Less portable in terms of the machines always and the speed of them being portable, but they're still portable. Now, the issue we have is there are lots of different formats to the structure and components that make up a virtual machine. A lot of them are proprietary formats. And what we have to do is we have to consider the difference between using proprietary formats to distribute them or open formats. So obviously the best way for us to do it, because I'm not going to be fully aware of which virtualization platform you end up settling on, so I'm going to give you them in open format, which should be portable into pretty much all of the virtual environments that are out there. So the actual format we're going to be using is what we call OVA, which has got two sorts of names. It's either referred to as Open Virtual Appliance or Open Virtual Archive. And the reason it gets referred to as an archive because the OVA files that we see are in fact just zip files. And in them there is some components. First of all, there's a manifest file, and that's something .mf, whatever it may be. But in that file, what it contains is a list of all the other files that are inside the archive, plus a SHA-1 checksum just to do an integrity check on them. You'll also find in that file there's the virtual disk and an OVF file. Now the virtual disk is, as it says, it's a virtualized copy of a disk. But the OVF file is slightly different. That is an XML file, and it is a description of the virtual machine's characteristics. Things like number of virtualized CPUs, number of network cards, etc. So there's various components inside there that allow us to define what the machine is. So an OVA file is actually a zip file with a manifest and then the virtual machine inside of that. So how does that affect us? Well, in the laboratory, what we have to remember is we're going to be using VMware on Windows. That is pretty much the way we're going to do it if you're in the laboratory. If you're using your own laptop or PC and you're away from the lab, if you're going to be working between the two environments of the laboratory and home, then I suggest you use VMware. If, however, you're working completely independently, then you can work with VirtualBox on your own standalone machine. But bear in mind that the images you create, it's a little bit harder to transport them into the laboratory. It can be done, but it takes a bit more time, which sort of detracts from the learning time you have in the laboratory. Now, when it comes to what you have readily have access to, we've got VMware Workstation Player. Now, that's free, and that is in the laboratories, but you can also download it for non-commercial use. There's also VMware Workstation Pro, which is licensed. Now, that is in the laboratories. It's in there along with Player on all the machines. But that is licensed software. And then the third option we have is Oracle VirtualBox. Now, that is in the labs as well, but that's on a Linux platform, and that's used in other modules. So I suggest you try and stay away from that in the laboratories, but VirtualBox is there. So predominantly what you should be looking at using on your own environments would probably be Workstation Player. I would say should be your first choice if possible. And if not, you'll be using VirtualBox if you're nowhere near the laboratory. If you're familiar with VirtualBox and you're not going to be using any resources other than your own, well, that's quite happy for you to use that for this module. The module is got nothing to do with assessing you on using a virtual environment. It's about how the operating systems are configured. So it won't impact on any of your studies. Now, there are some issues we need to be aware of when it comes to these portable files. Yes, they're portable, so we can, most applications allow us to import them. Some will allow us to export them as well. But the issue we have is those platforms that we're actually running these virtual machines on can vary. The hardware can vary, and the way the virtualization software presents the hardware can vary as well. Now, that means we have a potential problem, because you have an interface between the hardware, the virtual machine, and that is the virtualization software. And how that presents hardware can impact on how you set up a machine. And we can't cater for that in the OVA files. So what we have to do is we have to make sure that what we have is an ability not just to import, but then also to modify. And that is one of the issues that you may come across when you're working with these OVA files. So that said, what do we need to do? Well, the main problem you're going to come across is the network card not being recognized. Now, that isn't a fault of the OVA, that's just the way that virtualization works. So if you find that your network card does not function inside your virtual machine, what you'll need to do is check the IP address. And you can do that on the server version by simply typing in IPA, and that will bring up the addresses. And you should notice the name of the network card. That's important because the name of the network card might not be the same as the name used, because it's a logical name in the actual netplan files. So you may need to edit them. So to do that, what you would do is do an IPA, identify the network card, and then taking that name, then modify the netplan file so that they match. Then all you have to do is do a netplan apply, and that will take those settings and apply them to the machine. Once that's done, once on that machine where you're running the virtual server, it'll work from then on. So you just boot the machine up and it'll work perfectly well. But that is the problem you might have. Now that's for the server, and that's because it uses netplan. When it comes to the clients, it's totally different. The clients, specifically Ubuntu Client 2004, doesn't use netplan. It uses something called Network Manager. And the nice thing about Network Manager is it will identify whatever network card is available on the machine and will apply the settings to that. So when it comes to the client side, we simply import the machine and Net Manager will deal with it for us. However, we do have a problem with the server because netplan doesn't do that for us. So we're going to have to make some changes. Okay then, so all I've covered is basically saying what the OVA formats are, the zip files. And the issue we have is we need to be using a platform that's appropriate. Now that OVA format file you can import into whatever platform you want. Once it's imported into VMware actually, and you have the virtual machines on a hard drive, they will work across all the machines, no problem. However, when you're importing to different environments, you should always check the network card, and this is the post-implementation requirements. Check the network card is working correctly on the server version and make the changes appropriately. Okay, what I'd like to do now is quickly jump out and bring up VMware and start actually setting up, importing the server, and I'll import the client as well into VMware and have a look at what we need to do to get the OVA files in there. Okay then, when it comes to setting this up, what we need to do is, here's my copy of VMware Workstation, there's my server and my client OVA files. So all I need to do is simply go in and open a virtual machine. Now fortunately, it recognizes it. So if I go to here, I can say there's server, I can go into there and say, right, let's import that. So I double click on it, it recognizes its name and asks where I want to put it. Now if you're storing these on a USB drive, this is where you would navigate to it and save it in the folder. But I'm just going to leave it where I've got it here just to go through the process. So if I click import, it'll start the import. Now I expect it to give me an error. And the reason for that is these OVA files have got a little bit extra information in them that VMware doesn't need. So it'll come up and say there's an issue. It doesn't matter. I can simply say don't show that error message again, and it won't come up again, or I can say retry right now. If I say retry, it will actually continue on and it will import that machine. Now this might take a little bit of time. It's not that long, but a little bit of time. So I'll skip the video forward here and then we'll continue when we've got the import finished. Okay, I didn't have to leave that long, and basically the progress bar went along and then it created that machine. Now what I can do at this point is, if I want, I can actually have a look at the machine settings that have been imported. I can see it's got 2 gig of memory, 1 processor, 60 gig hard drive, virtual of course, and that's all set up and there's enough in there for what I need to do. So next thing I need to do is, rather than jump on now, what I'm going to, and jump out and start starting that, what I'm going to do is I want to import the client as well. So it'll be the same kind of thing. So if I go back to the home, open the virtual machine, pick the client, it comes up and says it's client, says where it's going to put it, and I import that as well. So that's the 2 machines imported. Again, I didn't say don't show the message, so it has. Click retry, and it will go through. And the progress bar will make its way up to the top, and then we'll have both the machines. So again, I'll jump out and I'll jump back in when that's done, and we'll start both those machines up and have a look at them working. Okay, that's both the client and the server now installed. So what I think I'll do is I'll move this over slightly, and what we'll do is we'll start them up. So first of all, we'll pick the client machine and we'll play that virtual machine. And just while that's starting up, what I'll do is I'll bring in another copy and I'll start the server up as well, and then we'll start setting them up. So play that virtual machine too. Okay, so there's the client machine up and running. I can select student, Northumbria, bring this in the screen a bit more. Okay, the server's up. Okay, let's log into the server while we're waiting for the client. So we go student Northumbria. Okay, so that's done. So if I now go over to here and have a look at my network card, connection failed. That's a different thing altogether though. That's because I'm not using the network card on my machine, which I'll just fix now. Okay, that's all enabled now. Okay, I've enabled my Ethernet card on my machine now, so this should be okay. So if we now go, there we go. So if we now go to here, we go to our wired connection, go to wired settings. What we find is we've got a gig connection. If I go into the settings, we'll see that I've got all my connections and I've got an IP address from my local network, and my IP4 settings are DHCP. So that's done. I don't need to do anything with that, but we'll come back to this machine in a moment because I'm going to do the connectivity. Now I'm going to cancel that for now. Okay, so on the server, if I do IPA, what I'm going to find is I have a network card here, and we can see the network card is ENS33, but that's not what it is in the configuration file. So sudo nano /etc/ netplan, and the netplan file, Northumbria, as my password, and I can see it's down as a different address altogether, and it should be ENS33. So I change those settings, save that, exit out, sudo netplan apply, and now I should be given an address. If I just give it a second, IP, there we go, and now the network card has an address, and we can see there 10.168.100.39. So that's the server and this is the client, and what I'll do now is I'll get the IP address of the client and I'll ping it. So my wired settings, just get the address here, and then I'll go ping 10.168, obviously your addresses will be different, 100. And my address is 26. So there we go. So the server here is now communicating with the client. And if I cancel that, close that down, Control-Alt-T, and then I can ping back 10.168.100. If I Control-C there, it's my address is 39.39, and now we can see I can ping. So that's a pinging both ways. Now obviously this is a raw server, so it's using DHCP. you will need to configure that for static addresses. But that's the two machines, the client machine and the server machine, up and running, and they're actually imported to VMware from OVA files. Okay, I hope that gets you going. Any problems, obviously, get in touch.